There are several Asian languages that are commonly studied around the world, like Mandarin, Japanese, and Korean. One Asian language that's less commonly studied, but is still an important major language, is Vietnamese, or
tiếng Việt,
as it's called in Vietnamese. Vietnamese is the first language of around 85 to 90 million people worldwide. Most of them in Vietnam, of course, while several million Vietnamese people abroad also speak it. It's also the second language of 10 to 15% of Vietnam's population, since there are many linguistic minorities in Vietnam. Vietnamese is part of the Mon Khmer branch of the Austroasiatic language family. It's by far the Austroasiatic language with the most speakers, the second most spoken being Khmer, or Khmer as they call it. The base of Vietnamese is Mon Khmer, but similar to Japanese and Korean, Vietnamese has undergone a tremendous amount of influence from Chinese. Vietnam came under almost continuous Chinese rule for a period of around 1,000 years, beginning in the year 111 BCE. Around this time or earlier, Proto-Viet Muong, the ancestor of the Vietnamese and Muong languages, arose. As we'll see later, Vietnamese is a tonal language, but Proto-Viet Muong did not yet contain any tones. It might be tempting to conclude that Vietnamese adopted its tones from Chinese, but that's very unlikely. Both the tones of Chinese and the tones of Vietnamese arose naturally through a process of tonogenesis, meaning that the tones arose from other phonological features. As the Proto-Vietnamese language arose from Proto-Viet Muong, it first developed three tone distinctions. After this, by the 9th century, a huge amount of Chinese vocabulary began to enter the language because the formal written language was Classical Chinese, with characteristic Vietnamese pronunciation, and attempts to write vernacular Vietnamese were made using Chinese characters. Today, approximately 30% of commonly used words are of Chinese origin, while in formal texts that rises to 60% or even 70%. For example, this recent newspaper headline meaning, "The price of jackfruit drops to the floor, farmers suffer heavy losses." In this example, 4 out of 8 words are of Chinese origin. The system of writing using entirely Chinese characters was called
chữ Hán,
or
chữ Nho.
Then after Vietnam returned to Vietnamese rule under the Ngo dynasty, a new system was developed in which Chinese characters were used for words of Chinese origin and some native Vietnamese words, while newly created characters were used for Vietnamese words. This system was called
chữ Nôm.
The new characters were adaptations or combinations of existing Chinese characters or their elements, but they weren't used in Chinese. We can see an example of this in the name of this writing system.
Chữ Nôm.
The second character exists in Chinese, but the first one doesn't. From the 15th century to the 19th century, this system was used for writing Vietnamese literature, such as The Tale of Kieu, perhaps the most famous Vietnamese work of poetry. Also, by the start of this period, the 3 tones of Vietnamese had split into its present 6 tones. Meanwhile, Classical Chinese continued to be used for official writing and amongst the elite. This situation continued until the French occupation of Vietnam, which began in the 19th century. French replaced Chinese as the language of administration and the elite, and the French encouraged the use of
chữ Quốc ngữ
to write Vietnamese. The name of this script means National Language Script, and is the current writing system which is based on a modified Latin alphabet. It was first created by Portuguese missionaries in the 17th century, but didn't become widespread until the French were in power. French influence on Vietnamese also took place in the form of loanwords, even though they may not stand out as French because of their Vietnamese pronunciation and spelling. For example,
cà phê,
café in French, meaning coffee.
ga,
In the word
nhà ga,
from gare, meaning railway station.
format,
From fromage, meaning cheese.
sơ mi,
In the word
áo sơ mi,
comes from chemise, meaning shirt.
xà phòng,
From savon, meaning soap. As you can see, a lot of the French loanwords are common everyday words, but there are far fewer of them than there are Chinese loanwords. One study concluded that 90% of loanwords come from Chinese, while 4% come from French. If you found the pronunciation of those French loanwords disorienting, then you've just experienced a touch of what most learners find challenging about Vietnamese, its phonology. While Vietnamese is quite straightforward in other ways, its phonology is fairly complex. Standard Vietnamese doesn't officially have standardized pronunciation. The Hanoi dialect is sometimes thought of as a de facto standard, and is the variety used in most of this video. But there are many varieties with different pronunciation, including the dialect of Ho Chi Minh, which is obviously an important one. Northern Vietnamese basically has 19 consonants, while there are 23 consonants if we include all dialects. They're written with 16 single consonant letters, 10 consonant digraphs, and 1 consonant trigraph. That's a total of 27 consonant graphemes, meaning that some consonant sounds are written in more than one way. There are 11 vowel sounds, written with 12 graphemes, as well as 28 or more diphthongs and 12 or more triphthongs. Standard Vietnamese also has 6 phonemic tones, meaning that different tones indicate a difference in meaning. The tones are flat mid,
ma,
low falling,
ma,
high rising,
má,
low falling broken,
mạ,
low falling rising,
mã,
high rising broken.
mã,
Notice that each of these syllables is a different word with a different meaning. For example,
ma,
means the ghost, while
má,
means mom. When you include all the different phonemes, including tones, there are between 4,500 and 4,800 possible syllables in spoken Vietnamese, depending on the dialect, and Vietnamese orthography can represent 6,200 different syllables, any syllable that appears in any dialect. Several learners of Vietnamese whom I've spoken to told me that learning to produce all the different phonemes of Vietnamese is really just a matter of practice, but that building listening comprehension skills is the bigger challenge. But not everything about Vietnamese is difficult or complicated. Its grammar is fairly straightforward. Vietnamese is an analytic language, meaning that there are no inflections, and grammatical relationships between words are shown through word order and by adding adjacent helper words instead. This means that you don't have to learn various forms of words. There are no case inflections, no conjugations, no grammatical genders, and no plural form. You just learn one form of each word. People sometimes refer to Vietnamese as a monosyllabic language, but that's not precisely accurate. Many words have 2 syllables, especially compound words that consist of 2 independent words put together. But if you separate those 2 pieces of the word, each of those pieces is normally a meaningful independent word on its own. Those words that join together to form compound words don't always have 1 syllable each, but they usually do. Also, it's worth noting that more compound words are used in writing and formal speech, so there are a lot more monosyllabic words in colloquial speech. The basic word order of Vietnamese is SVO. For example, the sentence meaning he ate dinner.
anh ấy đã ăn tối.
Here's the subject, here's the verb, and here's the object. Adverbs usually come after verbs and after the object of the verb if there is one.
Anh ấy ăn tối sớm.
This means he ate dinner early. Adjectives also come after the nouns they modify, like this phrase meaning the nice restaurant.
Nhà hàng đẹp.
Literally, restaurant beautiful. So do demonstrative adjectives.
Nhà hàng đó.
That restaurant. Literally, restaurant that. Possessives come after nouns as well, sometimes with a possession marker.
Nhà hàng của anh ấy.
His restaurant. Literally, restaurant, possession marker, he. The possession marker is sometimes dropped when talking about subjects such as parents, home, or school, but in this case it's necessary. In equational sentences, there's no verb meaning to be when the predicate is an adjective.
Hồng thông minh.
This means Hong is smart. But when the predicate is a noun or a noun phrase, then the linking verb
là
is used.
Hồng là ca sĩ.
Hong is a singer. Word for word, the sentence is Hong is singer. Note that Vietnamese does not have articles, so this sentence has no equivalent of the word a. The cardinal number
1.
is sometimes used in a way similar to the English indefinite article. In this case, it might be used to emphasize indefiniteness.
Hồng là một ca sĩ.
This too means Hong is a singer. Verbs in Vietnamese always have the same form. There are no conjugations. Tense and aspect is expressed with time markers that come before the verb.
Anh ấy lái xe máy.
This means he rides a motorbike.
Anh ấy đã lái xe máy.
He rode a motorbike.
Anh ấy đang lái xe máy.
He's riding a motorbike.
Ngày mai anh ấy sẽ lái xe máy.
Tomorrow he will ride a motorbike. There are also some adverbs that can be used to show the action's relationship to time, sometimes alone and sometimes together with a time marker.
Anh ấy sắp đến đây để mượn xe máy của tôi.
He's about to come here tomorrow to borrow my motorbike. Word for word it's he, about to, come, here, to, borrow, motorbike, of me. The main thing to note here is that the verb itself never changes. Another word is added to give information about time. Let's go back to the present tense sentence and add something.
Anh ấy lái một chiếc xe máy màu đỏ.
This means he rides a red motorbike. Word for word it's he, ride, one, counter, motorbike, color, red. This word here
Chiếc
is a classifier or a counter, like a unit for counting nouns that differs depending on the category of noun. In English, there's some limited use of words like this, like a pair of pants or sheets of paper. But in Vietnamese, they're much more frequently used. They come after the number and before the noun. This one's used for vehicles and for individual items in a set of items. These are the most common counters.
Người,
This is a counter for people. For example,
2 người Mỹ,
meaning 2 Americans. There's a different classifier for other animate nouns, which are normally animals.
tôi có một con chó.
I have a dog. For inanimate nouns, there are lots of different specific classifiers, but there's one very common one that can be used for most inanimate objects in general.
Cái, anh ấy đã mua 2 cái bút.
He bought 2 pens. Note that in each of these cases, the counter comes after the cardinal number and before the noun. Now let's look at a couple of questions and possible answers and see what we find. This question means, do you drink alcohol?
Bạn có uống rượu không?
Word for word it's you, confirmation particle, drink, alcohol, negation marker. Yes or no questions are commonly formed using the words
Có,
and,
không,
which are also used to answer such a question with yes or no.
có,
Comes after the subject and
không,
comes at the end. It's kind of like saying, you do drink alcohol, no?
không, tôi không uống rượu.
No, I don't drink alcohol. Word for word, no, I, no, drink alcohol. Notice here that the negation marker comes before the verb.
Có, tôi uống rượu.
Yes, I drink alcohol. Word for word, it's confirmation particle, I drink alcohol. There's the confirmation particle, the same one that appears in the question. Another question, this time an open question.
Bạn sống ở đâu?
Word for word, it's you live in where?
Tôi sống ở Hà Nội.
I live in Hanoi. I live in Hanoi. Open questions are basically formed by substituting the question word for the word that answers the question. Some question words come at the beginning of the sentence and some come at the end. It's worth mentioning something about the personal pronouns. These are basically neutral, polite pronouns, but there are actually numerous different pronouns to choose from depending on the gender and age or social position of the person you're speaking to. This is another one of the challenging things for learners of Vietnamese. On the easier side, personal pronouns remain the same regardless of whether they're a subject or an object. The examples so far have been in Northern Vietnamese, but Vietnamese has 3 main dialect groups: Northern, in particular Hanoi, Central, and Southern, in particular the Ho Chi Minh dialect. Naturally, the Northern dialect of Hanoi and the Southern dialect of Ho Chi Minh are both popular for learners. And of course there are differences. Northern Vietnamese has 6 tones, as we saw before, while Southern Vietnamese has 5. 2 of the tones represented in writing are pronounced the same in Southern Vietnamese. So in Northern Vietnamese there's
Mã,
and.
mã,
In Southern Vietnamese there's
mã,
and.
mã,
Also, the general range of pitches used is higher in the north and lower in the south, even though the relative contours of the pitches are similar. Another difference is that the letter D and the digraph GI are pronounced Z in the north, but Y in the south. For example, this word meaning easy in Northern Vietnamese
dễ dàng,
and in Southern Vietnamese.
dễ dàng.
Another letter that's pronounced as Z in Northern Vietnamese is R. In Southern Vietnamese, it's pronounced similar to the R sound commonly used in English, R. For example, the word for alcohol in Northern Vietnamese
rượu,
and in Southern Vietnamese.
Rượu,
Another difference lies in the letter V, which is pronounced V in Northern Vietnamese, but in Southern Vietnamese it's Y, at least in casual conversation. For example, the word for ticket in Northern Vietnamese
vé,
and in Southern Vietnamese.
vé,
Also, S and X are both pronounced S in Hanoi and much of the north, but in Southern Vietnamese, S is sh and X is S. For example, the word for excellent in Northern Vietnamese
xuất sắc,
and in Southern Vietnamese.
xuất sắc.
Another difference is that the digraphs TR and CH are both pronounced ch in the north. In the south, TR is pronounced ch and CH is pronounced ch, but these days more people pronounce them the same. There's also a significant number of different words between the 2 varieties. We can see one example in this sentence from before.
anh ấy đã mua 2 cái bút.
And here it is in Southern Vietnamese.
Anh ấy đã mua 2 cây viết.
Notice the different word for pen. This is just one example, but there are numerous different words like this. As you can see, Vietnamese is a very interesting language. It may not be the easiest language for learners to take on, and its phonology may present a challenge, but in certain ways it's a very straightforward language. If you've ever been frustrated by cases in German or verb conjugations in Spanish, then Vietnamese grammar might be a breath of fresh air. And most learners say it's a fun language to learn, especially if you have a growth mindset and a long-term view for the language. The question of the day. For speakers of Vietnamese, how easy is it for you to communicate with speakers of other dialects? And for other people, what's your impression of Vietnamese? What seems challenging and what seems straightforward? This is the part of the video when I say thanks to the LangFocus Patreon supporters, especially these ones right here on the screen, because they are the top tier Patreon supporters, so many extra special thanks go out to them. And to everyone, thank you for watching and have a nice day.